Okay, well, welcome to the July office hours. Very excited about this month's topic. So for those of you that are new to office hours, this is a monthly virtual program that we launched just this year, actually in January, really with the intention to bring our community members together. So every month there's a different topic, and the themes kind of vary between industry topics like this month's, and also more professional or career related topics. So stay tuned for the rest of the year's calendar, which I will be publishing within just a few days, which I'm very excited about. I'm admitting just a few more people here. All right, so one of my favorite things about the office hours program is really that there are no rules. So like I said, we created this to bring folks together, meaning that we want everybody's questions to be heard and opinions to be heard. So feel free at any time during Mark's presentation to take yourself off mute, ask your question out loud. And of course, feel free to ask your questions through the chat as well. I will be monitoring the chat. So with that, this month's topic is the transformative impact of GenAI and really empowering IT teams, like everybody on this call, to think about AI and the art of the possible to transform your business. So we have Mark Cunningham on. He is the product manager of AI Ops at Aviatrix. And we also have Luke on, who is the Senior Director of AI Ops, of the AI Ops Transformation team. I can't even say transformation. So with that, I'll hand it over to Shahzad Ali. He is my co-host, and I will let him take it away.
All right. Thanks, Katie. Welcome, everyone. My name is Shahzad Ali. I'm delighted to be your co-host today. So with years of experience in the IT industry, and now a passion for integrating and using AI into networking and security, I'm thrilled to guide you through what promises to be an insightful and engaging session. And for that, we have two distinguished presenters, as you heard, Mark and Luke, and both are member of our internal IT organization. So Mark and Luke, why don't you quickly introduce yourself, and then we'll go from there. What do you guys do?
Luke, I guess I'll go first. Yeah. So, hey guys. Some of you already may know me, but I'm Luke Bockelman. I've been about at Aviatrix about almost 5 years now. So I originally started in sales as a field engineer, and moved over to the IT team, reporting to the CIO of the company. Really because I had an interest in how generative AI could not only just help our go-to-market, but also help our product and our platform. So sort of taking the learnings that I had, both operating and selling, networking and security over the past 25 years, seeing how then I could apply this to both our go-to-markets as well as our platform and product to obviously improve the platform and product and grow the business. So happy to be here.
Cool. Thanks, Luke. Thanks, Luke.
Hey, thanks, Shahzad, for that introduction. Hey guys, my name is Mark Cunningham. I work for Luke. I've been with the company for about 5.5 years. I'm one of those weird guys who's from San Francisco, who lives in San Francisco and works in San Francisco. So yeah, we're definitely San Francisco's in the house. It was kind of a long road to kind of get me to Aviatrix. Like I started out as an admin and then became a penetration tester. And then like Luke, I was a sales engineer for the company for quite some time. And then I joined the program with Luke, and here we are.
Nice.
So, well, too, so I'll go ahead and get started. We titled this "The Transformative Impact of Generative AI," and the goal here, as stated, is we want to dive in and help you make the most out of this innovative technology. Something we'll definitely try to do. Probably less through the focus of practical application at this time, and more through the lens of a proper orientation of AI philosophy. There's a lot of hurdles. There's a lot of things a lot of hoops you kind of have to jump through before you can you can really get a good handle on what AI is and what is possible for you and yourself and your organization. So with that, let's go ahead and jump in. What we'll do is we'll start with some, and hopefully everyone can see desktop
Yep.
now.
Mm-hmm.
What we'll do is we'll start with some terminology, just to kind of get everybody on the same page and help you give a foundational aspect of what some of the core concepts are and how they relate to one another. And next I'll cover some details of the AI State of the Union, address some of the hype, give you some opinions and whatnot. Luke will then run you through some ideas of what it means to have an AI program in-house, kind of the who's who of who's that, and kind of who we are and where we got and how we got here. And then finally, I'll discuss a little bit about some things that I've thought about, and some possibilities for some practical application for what we can do for generative AI. That sound good? Of course it does.
Sounds good.
All right. So, and remember, I want to take you kind of through the bracket of like what all these things mean. There's a lot of things that we think these things mean, and there's a lot of things that you kind of hear about in the media. So I want to make sure that everyone kind of starts with a clean slate, just in terms of the way that we view things. And I'm not just going to read from what's on the screen. I'm going to kind of give you my own rendition, but definitely take these definitions to heart. So artificial intelligence, I'm going to call this like a global umbrella term that inspires thoughts of the Terminator and losing your job to a machine. It really shouldn't, though, because AI is really just another step in the cycle of our advancement. It concerns all these things that you've probably heard about in some respect or other, like deep learning, unsupervised learning, generative AI. So all these things kind of covered generically under artificial intelligence. Machine learning, this is a concept by which algorithms respond to the feedback and reinforcement of their learning that allows them to improve their performance. And this is really the eighth wonder of the world. You've got you probably have heard several of these examples, like in the news or what you're reading on your science articles and whatnot. Like a piece of software that is able to look at X-rays better than your average X-ray technician, or MRI scans that can detect with high precision on whether or not a given patient has cancer. So it's a very specific component of tooling of the way that artificial intelligence works. Artificial general intelligence, this really is in all its preeminent forms. This is Jarvis from Iron Man. This is the penultimate end game for AI, and this is going to be a form of AI that can consume multiple forms of input, ingest lots of different kinds of data, and it can execute on tasks across multiple contexts. Something that is not really possible today, but when you think about terms of like what you've seen in the movies and whatnot, think about something that can take one form of input in one context and then execute action upon it in another context. The smaller piece of that is narrow AI. So if you look at artificial general intelligence in terms of lots of little forms of narrow AI, then you can really get a good understanding of what it is. Now, narrow AI is a more important term to understand because it describes every kind of AI that you've ever interacted with, thus up until the advent of ChatGPT, which we'll get into in a moment. Narrow AI is a piece of software that's been especially developed for performing a specific task or operation, like facial recognition. So a singular use case. And this is going to be driven through the concepts of deep learning and machine learning that allows it to improve upon this singular task. Now, generative AI, this is a whole new form of This is a whole new form of AI. It expands upon the concept of narrow AI. It's not quite artificial general intelligence, but it's a type of AI that allows you to have a tool that can actually create things in response to input. So ChatGPT was the first iteration of generative AI that became available to the public. And now there's things that allow you to create video. There's things that allow you to create music. So any kind of input that's received that can then give you something else out of it, that's going to be your generative AI. Now, a large language model, this is what we refer to commonly as a chatbot or ChatGPT. And this is the new linguistic paradigm of the way that we will interact with and sort of define AI in general, just because it's so ubiquitous. Ever since OpenAI came out with ChatGPT. It's not AGI, not by any stretch of the imagination, but it's also not narrow AI, because a large language model can generate output based upon the input it receives. It can also generate different kinds of text upon demand. It can interact over multiple forms of input. It can manipulate text. It can do analysis upon text. So it really is, kind of the new Swiss Army knife of AI. That all make sense?
Makes sense, Mark, to me.
I guess the one
And
thing
one
I would just
question,
add actually to that is, going back to large language models, is the training of that was the internet, right? So that's what essentially gave us the ChatGPT, is how did these things learn? It was a combination of training and inference. And the large language models, what were they trained on? They were essentially trained on the bulk of what's on the internet. So just wanted to add that there. That's what makes it large, is the training that came in that trained these models, that was highly computational, was basically the internet and the crawling of the internet. You can think of like Google search, and then you can kind of think of the output of that. So hopefully
right.
that
So
also
one
helps.
question, no, that is really helpful. One question I have is about the narrow eyes. So since we are all networking engineers, architects, if we are creating something very specific for in networking domain, let's say network log analysis, could it be called a narrow AI use case, like the facial recognition use case?
You want to take that,
Can
Mark?
we treat it?
Yeah, you could do that. It really would depend upon the context in which you have the tool operational. So if you create a specialized machine learning algorithm that is meant to ingest a certain form of log input for a specific device, say a firewall, and it's meant to detect a certain kind of anomaly, or say, the seeding of a ransomware attack, that's where that's where you would kind of define that in that use case. Now, if I were to be operating upon that in the same manner, but using an LLM and just dump a bunch of log files and make it available to a generative AI platform, that's where the difference actually lies in that. So if you want to have just a small kind of tool, maybe like something almost as succinct as like a script, but it has a whole machine learning component to it, that would be considered a form of narrow AI. But it really just depends upon the mechanics in which that you bring the enumerations and the insights to life.
Got it. And then for the large language module, obviously you need to attach some sort of LLM, which is networking or security-based LLM, to this narrow AI. Who is going to train that LLM? Because Luke mentioned that the ChatGPT LLM, for example, was trained based on the internet data. So what's going on in that world of LLMs related to networking and security, maybe?
You want to grab that one up? Yeah. So it kind of depends, right? So depending on your use cases, I think it's all about what type of data you're feeding into it. And this is where you kind of get into the question of like open source versus closed source. So if you think about like open source, those are like, ones that say Meta has opened up, like Llama and those types of things. What's nice about open source is that you get the pre-training, as well as you can do your own fine tuning. So Llama, Mistral are examples of that. That may be something you want to do when you have very specific proprietary data that you want to train and build your own models for. Now, a closed source is like ChatGPT, where you can't do any of the fine tuning. You're essentially interfacing with the UI or just an API. And that's like ChatGPT, Google Bard, and those types of models where you don't have access to actually fine tune it. It's trained on its own thing, and you just have to use it and interface it. So when you talk about specific logs, it kind of depends on whether you feel comfortable potentially feeding that in and asking a public source, what is this telling me? There may be, like, you may need to anonymize it, like with certain public IPs, things like that, depending on your comfort level. Or you decide to do something that's sort of that's open source, that you pull into your environment, or you have private access to, say with Azure or other types of cloud services, where you interface with that and they promise that this is a local instance of a trained model that doesn't share or add or use your data to actually improve. So it doesn't share your data, it keeps it private. So those are just different sort of architectural approaches you want to consider depending on your data. And I think we're going to go into the importance of data and that in the next slide.
All right, let's dive in, man. And audience, please feel free to ask any question. Unmute your mic. You can ask. This is our office hours, so yes, this session is for you, not for us.
Mohammed,
right?
go ahead. You have a question.
Oh.
I think he has something in chat, but feel free.
It looks like he asked a question in chat. With models, how to improve, generate, and build the architecture with cloud networking and filter threats or anomalies. It'll probably be done the same way that you would train any model on any type of specific data. I mean, so you're going to have a specific type of networking substrate that is going to be, pertinent to the clouds, depending upon, what level of layer 2 and layer 3 is exposed to you in AWS, what layer of layer 3 is exposed to you in Azure. So, but really what it's going to be about is it's about feeding data and telling the algorithms, like, this is what this kind of anomaly looks like. This is what a threat looks like. This is what to look for. This is ARP cache poisoning right here. This is somebody from this subnet trying to get into this subnet, and that looks suspicious because, I don't have any routes that actually expose that subnet, directly. So someone's trying to bang on that door, in a place that they're not really welcome to. So now, and like what I'll be able to show you, like, you can take any log file right now and you can drop it into ChatGPT and say, hey, what do you think about this log file? The only kind of analysis it's going to be able to give you is the analysis that it's been exposed to on the web. Now, there's probably a handful of sites on the web where you have different forms of data that are posted, and then you have lots of people who have been commenting on it, like, oh, look, this is an attack thread. You can see at line 4021, you can see, oh, there's a TCP frame that does XYZ, and that means this. But also in the same token, if the person is saying that and making that statement is wrong, that also gives you the possibility of, what will be considered to be a hallucination in that concept. So it's all about having a good set of training data that has been trained well and trained accurately, in order to prove upon any system, including cloud networking and filtering for threats and anomalies.
Awesome. Thanks, Mark.
All right. So just want to give everybody kind of a heads up on, like, where we are with AI, what it's, kind of what's going on in the industry, to kind of give everybody a little bit of an inoculation of, like, where, what AI means, and, and how to deal with all the hype that kind of comes through all the airwaves. So as you go down the AI path and you make an attempt to become educated on the subject, the first thing you need to understand is that AI is not some spooky action from a distance or a magical appliance that you're going to bolt onto an organization and suddenly revenue starts falling out of the sky. And Wall Street's even getting a taste of this corner of reality, as some of you may have seen in the news, where the NASDAQ lost $1 trillion in value yesterday. the reason for that is the speculators in New York had a little bit more pie in the sky machinations with a big payoff in mind when it came to their bets on AI, unaware of how much of a long play this technology is going to be. Now, I say their bets were well placed, but I think they needed to have a little bit of a different time horizon, and then these things would have paid off. So the truth of the matter is that it really is going to take a team of dedicated individuals and a decent amount of time to properly spin up and build an effective AI ML program to give you actionable intelligence and meaningful insights into your data that can be used for, augmentation of your forecasting and your execution. And it really is all about the data. If you're a candy machine vendor, and you go around and you have, 1,700 stores, and all you do is you fill candy in these little machines and you put a quarter in and turn the knob, the chances are that you're going to have some really good data about, how to game the stock market are fairly low. So, but if you are Walmart or if you are Amazon and you have, you have the data of the billions of transactions that you have per month, that are telling you who's buying what and when, from what kind of laptop, what part of the world, what time of day. The chances are really good if you've got, like is true, if you have some really good artificial intelligence and machine learning experts to go to work on that data, over time, you're going to have some really good actual intelligence to predict who's going to buy what, under what circumstances, and when should I put this on sale? So the conditions that make AI and ML valuable are going to vary from organization to organization. And it's not just this pie in the sky switch that you turn on and suddenly, all these magical things just start falling out of the sky. Now, the value of AI, in my opinion, it's the value of the AI to organizations is going to materialize much in the way the internet did when it came on the scene in April of 1995. We're really in the opening salvos of AI. It's as close to the beginning as you can possibly be. So if this was baseball, it is the top of the first inning on opening day with runners at first and third. OpenAI just came out and smashed a line drive double with their debut of ChatGPT. They got 100 million people to sign up in the first 60 days. But realistic, what that means is we're just still in that spot where we're all dialing up with AOL and we're using Netscape Navigator, and everyone is figuring out what the AI equivalent of a website is. Companies all around the world, first world economies are literally going to be building out their AI infrastructure for hundreds of years. So this is going to be a wild ride, and it just got started. Now, when everyone starts talking about AGI and how it's inevitable and how it's due to, and how it's due at the end of this year or the end of next year, and you listen to Sam Altman and Zuckerberg talk about this, that, and the other thing, and you've got Google engineers clamoring about how their chatbot is sentient. Understand that this has probably less to do with market trends and more to do with media cycles and hype, and it's going to be of no benefit to your ability to accurately predict the effectiveness of an AI program enough to put together a proposal that your boss is going to sign off on and assign budget for you during the next fiscal year. Even with, the things that come out in the media, like, Google's Gemini saying, like, it's really a good idea for you to put glue on your pizza. And things like that. The only thing that makes me think of is that we all love pizza. We all used to eat paste when we were in kindergarten. So they got some good buzz out of it and such. But regardless, Gemini is still like the third most popular generative AI search tool you can have. So there's a lot of noise to filter out of what you have coming in. But remember, like, we're still in the opening ceremony of our fascination with AI, and all the big boys are going to be vying for supremacy with unusual headlines, a lot of hand waving, and just remember, it's going to be not a whole lot more than just a distraction.
Okay, so what you're saying, what I heard is that our jobs are safe.
Realistically, I think, the kinds of things that we've been saying in-house is, it's not, AI is not just going to come through and gobble up all jobs, in everywhere in sight. What I will say is that the advent of generative AI has had an effect on the economy. Like a good portion of all of those writers and actors who are in the SAG-AFTRA, or I'm sorry, I don't know the actual name, the union for Hollywood. A lot of those folks, like, you know, they got back into work, but now they're unemployed because they got laid off, because there's not a whole lot of room for creative writing teams to be hired, you know, in the outright, when you can just walk up to a computer and say, write me a story that rivals you know, Goonies or you know, or Never Ending Story or something like that, and it's just boom, now I've got 10 of them. So those kinds of jobs have been affected, and they will kind of continue to be affected as more and more people become fluent with these things. Now, the more complicated jobs of, you know, that require, you know, like hands-on keyboard, you know, moving through different contexts, working with customers, you know, and or developing really complicated products, you know, these you know, it's great to say these jobs are safe, but I think more in line with proper philosophy is the person who knows AI and has the ability to work with it and understands the concepts and knows how they can augment themselves and their ability to produce, those jobs are going to be protected more than somebody who does not. Would you concur with that, Luke?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think it's a great assistant. It kind of helps. It kind of gives you some different ways of potentially thinking or analyzing, but those contexts and switching context is really, really important. And you know, there's a certain context window that it can have, but the meaning behind it and the intent is really still far from being in those systems, and that's where AGI is pretty far out, but it's getting better and better. So,
do we have any other questions pop up? No, looks like not. All
No.
right, so Luke, I'm gonna pass it over to you. Why
I
don't
think
you give us
Mohammed, were you saying something, or you just acknowledged?
Yeah,
No,
just
I'm good to go. I'm gonna
want
pass
to
it over
know.
to you now. Why don't you give us a little rendition of like the kinds of things we've been doing here at Aviatrix?
Yeah, just Mohammed was there. Sorry, I couldn't hear you.
Sorry for interrupting. Uh, for statistics and analyze the data, but I think in this one we need data engineering for data. For the data maybe can be manipulated or changes every time. Yeah, it can be efficient. So as a solution for with the GenAI, how to be ensure that data will be genuine as a solution, and how it can be useful to us as a network engineer or somebody using with the cloud engineering, cloud networking with other cloud provider. That's what I'm asking. That's my question.
Yeah, I mean, I'll take a swing at this, and then Mark jump in. But yeah, statistically, you know, this is where, you know, if you look at logs and you look at like specifically in the context of cloud networking and filters and threat anomalies, I think it's less, if you go back, if you look at what Mark was describing as ML versus generative AI. ML, you could kind of think is just ways of looking at statistical anomalies. So it may not be like a generative AI where you're generating something new. It's more of just a statistical model of mapping patterns. But more importantly, with ML, you can look at the inverse patterns and cluster technologies and clustering type algorithms to kind of map things, because log files, threats, anomalies are really patterns and anti-patterns and matching them, right? So you're trying to see when something is different than what it was before. So it's less of a generative context where you're generating new content. It's really analyzing existing content and then being able to detect mathematically clusters and inverse clusters of patterns, right? So the problem statement kind of in some of this, maybe at a broad scale, when you're starting to look at statistics and those types of things, may bode well in an ML type approach rather than a generative type approach. There is a language component though, where you want to use generative AI maybe to describe something like an opaque log that humans have used to describe a point in the program or the code to say, this is what's happening, this is why the log exists. Because fundamentally, a log is there because programmatically, the developer wanted to let you or let anybody know that this part of the code was reached. So it may not be that intuitive. So there's two real components of it: pattern matching on the hitting of the log and how often and what that means. And that's sort of an ML approach, but understanding the meaning of the log, then maybe generative AI may help with just describing the words and then trying to find the next word to describe what it actually is, rather than how often it's happened or that sort of thing. So you can kind of break it up into two components. So I don't know, Mark, if you have any anything to add to that.
No, I think you hit that. I think you hit that nail right on the head.
Is that helpful, Mohammed, to at least give you some context?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, but to be sure, it will be, can be the data will be genuine with the GenAI or not?
What do you mean by genuine?
I
Truthful?
mean,
Or?
that one does. There's no how can I say it? As a false positives, those things.
So false positive, false negative. Yeah, so that's really where you as an expert need to determine, right? So that's where, again, being that sort of expert and having that context of knowing what's good and what's not is going to help with these various models. There's the component of AI where you have human feedback. There's a human feedback loop where to make this work, you still need an expert to say, yes, this is true, or no, this is wrong. And that's how you can actually modify, you can weight the different models to improve the outcome, right? So you need a human intervention to help with that.
Awesome.
Thanks, Luke. Thanks.
Yeah,
Yeah,
thank
sure.
you. Let's talk about the data. I saw something about the data. Data is the most important thing in the AI
Yeah,
world.
I think this is so what we're talking about here is really, you think about the data feeding into the models to train it, right? And what's really important, I think, for network engineers, security engineers, as you're servicing your customers and providing them networking and security, these models essentially use data to build, to feed, to understand, to infer, to train, right? So we talked about this a little bit earlier, where models need large amounts of data to train. That's essentially very highly computational. And that's where you have to make networking and security decisions with where your data is, right? So there's a lot of conversations these days about data captivity, where you want to make sure the data, your data, is where it makes the most sense to add the most value. So whether that's in AWS, whether that's in Azure, whether that's in GCP, you have to realize that, first of all, this is to really train these models and use whether it's a small narrow language model, or you want to build a small narrow language, or you want to access and understand what the data you have means, you have to send it somewhere, right? Which means data transfer costs, which means potential costs, which means, what do cloud service providers do? They're zero to no cost on the way in, but they really charge you a whole lot on the way out. So you need to think about where your data is and what it needs to access to sort of transfer and store this, which is important, right? So you're trying to strike the balance of access and privacy. And that's really what I think Mark and I learned, is for any of this stuff to make sense, whether you're using AI or ML, it's all about normalizing your data and having your data in a place that makes it easily accessible, where you're not having to pay the tolls to actually use your data to build out these different models, right? And that's where it's super important to focus on that and sort of get that right, and then you have it have it in a way so when you're providing a network or security service for your customers or your for who you work for, you kind of keep an eye on, you know, back and forth where it is, how secure it is, and what it needs to access as you kind of go through this journey.
Got it.
I've
Yeah.
got a kind of a dumb question.
Sure.
So
There are no dumb questions.
yes, there are. But so the so is kind of the intent, or maybe based on Luke, what you just said, right? So if you're looking at multi-cloud
Right.
networking via, you know, Aviatrix or things like that, and you're, so is it sort of like, okay, if I'm only in Amazon, then I could look at feeding all of that data and all that stuff into an Amazon model or something and being able to surface
Correct.
that.
Yeah.
But if you're doing multi-cloud, would you be looking at putting, you know, so AWS and AWS, GCP and GCP, Azure and Azure, right? But then how do you aggregate
Yeah.
that stuff across there to kind of help? I think that's
Exactly.
probably a necessary evil then with the having.
Yeah, well, and that's where you want that optionality. You're not going to be the person deciding which models necessarily to use, because typically this is based on the applications. But, you know, I've seen patterns time and time again where all of a said customer's data is in AWS, but they want to use a private instance of OpenAI, which is owned by Azure. So now you have to figure out, all right, well, how do I get my data from AWS to Azure? And I don't want to use public IP. I want to secure it over links. So there's a lot of patterns that you need to kind of think about where your data is and where it needs to access really is important. And you need to kind of think about you know, what are this, where is that? And does that make sense maybe to stay on-prem, but then you have, or in some colo location where, you know, something like an Equinix or a Megaport is kind of like a middle ground where it's not all the way in your data center, but it's not stuck in some, you know, in AWS where you're seeing, or your business is seeing, better value with models in, say, Azure. Because why? Because they happen to have OpenAI and ChatGPT. So these are the kind of questions you want to you sort of wrestle with, and what you need to, you know, kind of to be aware of, right? Because the value of all of this AI ML first starts with data and where your data sits, and then how do you add value to it with the least amount of sort of transactions.
Is there a possibility of building like a super LLM? Like one, you know, AWS has its own, Azure has its own. Maybe you need to leverage both to get something out of it.
Yeah.
Maybe there is a chance to build, and then provide networking for it.
Yeah, there's innovation in both. They both have some sort of secret sauce. So yeah, sometimes that's the case where, and you see this sometimes with responses too. You can have you know, you can give evaluations and look at two responses and then compare the two and pick the better one, right? So sometimes when you're asking questions and trying to get responses, you want to have two opinions. It's like going to the doctor and then getting a second opinion. You want to sort of assess that and then make a decision from that, and then maybe you prefer that one over that for this set of questions. So, you know, this is all, again, it goes back to, you know, data, just like in the old days with a 3-tier architecture, you know, front end app DB, you know, everything, and the most important things is the database. It's the same thing here. You just have a different interface where you're either private or publicly accessing it to add more value to your data. So yeah.
So in that use case, I think the multi-cloud network will become more and more important. Because now, like you said, you need second opinion, third opinion. You know, you're building an application, you're gathering this data from different service providers, could be public, could be, you know, some proprietary. So I think that is a very compelling use case for a multi-cloud network.
Yes. How we need the different service providers? Do we have a background backend which can do that part of the things? We need to do the integration, and the front end we run the queries for the different systems.
I'm sorry, Zahid, you kind of broke up in the beginning, so I missed the first couple of sentences. Sorry.
Okay, so the thing is that, is there any platform on the back end we can integrate for the LLM for Azure, for the AWS and stuff, and we can run the one query, whatever we wanted, and we'll get the answer from all the different providers?
Well, before you do that, you have to get connectivity. So you have to ask yourself whether this is a governance regulation, like what is your security posture? Do you feel comfortable asking a public IP or a private IP? And if it's a private, are they going to keep your data private, or are they going to share it to then grow the larger model? So you have to kind of make fundamental questions to yourself and to your team with regards to security and governance, GDPR, all sorts of sort of data questions about integrity, sovereignty, what is it? These are all sort of questions that you need to ask yourself first, and then figure out who those endpoints are, and then figure out how you connect to them, right? So there's a bit of a layer 8 type of conversation first before we start talking about like layer 3.
Okay, it's fine. Got it. Thank you.
One thing, going back to what Shahzad said about the multi-agents having two LLMs talk to each other, there is ongoing research going on with multi-agents collaborating together. So let's say you have a goal to write a good script for a YouTube video. You could have multiple agents, maybe one to do research, another to create the script, and that's something going on where multiple agents are collaborating together to have one goal in mind and accomplish the goal.
Yeah, that's like farming out, like, work. You have your little worker bees, and then they kind of talk, and then they work together and come back. So yeah, there's a ton of ways, agentic ways, other ways to kind of like get these responses, do some task, do some job. I think, Scott, you had a question too.
We've got a couple of questions in the chat. We got another one from Mohammed. Will there be governance and regulation for data in GenAI transformation? We have had a couple of those. So the European Union just passed a pretty sweeping AI regulation bill about 2.5 months ago. I have not read the transcript or the content of it. I do know that it's pretty imposing upon actually the companies who own the generative AI platforms, and then the companies who use it, especially when it comes to like the data as it affects their own citizens in relation to GDPR regulations. I really couldn't give you any more detail than that. I know California is trying to pass something right now. It looks like it's in the very beginning throes of the fights. You know how the legislative fights go in California. So I don't know that anything is really going to come of it. I would say that California is probably not trying to suppress the the economic virility of the companies that that live and work in San Francisco. We got OpenAI's right here. We have Google down the street. I do know that that California does have the nation's leading privacy legislation, so I think it might be something that kind of goes in tune with that, in as much as it is going to provide regulations on how companies build and run their own AI programs. I don't know what that will look like, but I don't think that any company that is not providing its own AI service, such as OpenAI, Google, probably not going to be subject to any kind of regulations. And then another one from Scott. Luke, did you want to take that one?
If many companies are building their own AI, doesn't that risk low quality AI? Are there so many CS people with the right skills? Yeah, so that's why there's a bunch of sort of startup companies happening to kind of broker that, right? So there's a bunch of startups that you could sort of try to navigate through, that is trying to provide that shim where you don't have to be like a multi-PhD student to kind of take advantage of these public or private models. There's a ton of companies that offer a private instance of a model where you can interface with it, and kind of the secret is in their the secret sauce is in the software to simplify your interactions with these models as you kind of build your own, if that's a decision you want to make. That is making it a lower barrier to entry where you don't need a bunch of like C++ developers to kind of get you started. They abstract that complexity with a private instance or a private service where, yeah, eventually, that interface may not be low level like programming or model development. It may be sort of middleware-ish type of CS people that you need that maybe have a background in statistics and modeling and not necessarily low level programming, right? So that's where there's a balance. And I think there's definitely some startups that are trying to close that gap. So because as you rightly said, Scott, there are sort of limited people right now, but I think the market will sort of drive an improvement for people to be able to fill that gap. Does that help, Scott? Or
Yes, thank you.
yeah, no problem.
All right, another question coming. What are you guys working on specific to AI? Luke, did you have any more to go into
go ahead.
detail about our own AI ML program that we have in house?
Yeah, I mean, I think for us, we're using it in the context right now in IT, in the context of how we can, as a startup, grow our business, right? But also using it to take to also, we also have a leg in product side where we're thinking about ways we can improve the product, take that sort of ML AI approach to help with operating, troubleshooting, diagnosing, we're kind of looking at it across a couple of different. So go to market, we're obviously using it for prompts in our docs pages. We have a support chatbot. We also are using it to help we're looking at using it to help diagnose logs and root cause analysis, these types of things. So we're looking across a variety of places, both internally as well as product and support facing, just to, be your assistant, right? To help with the product and the success of it.
So looking at kind of like a Amazon Q type of thing, but in the interface where I could, someone could maybe be in the management interface and not know how to do a specific unique thing that's kind of 3 layers down, and you could be like, how do
right. Absolutely, yeah. So we, definitely for that, and just kind of help speed things along. You can ask it questions. It can give you best practice recommendations. You don't have to go searching for docs, that type of thing. As you get a log or alarm, it kind of is your assistant to kind of help. So these types of sort of augmentation assistant type things on the customer facing side is where we're headed. Yeah. And I think a lot, that kind of is the next intuitive step, right? Is we presumably are the experts in our own logs and data. So we're going to sort of pass that value on to you with ways of making it more intuitive, making it more user friendly, and drive away the drudgery of having to look up things and kind of give you the answer in the context of the platform and what it's doing.
Could you also then look at utilizing that for, say configurations were done, weeks, months, years ago, and then you're like, hey, you know what, can you go out and find me, what is the least productive connectivity, or how can I improve, from point A to B?
Exactly. Yeah, that's where things get super fun, where you can actually look at utilization and say, hey, instead of having to worry about Terraform code, you just say, hey, I'm looking to, you just explain your intent. I'm looking to offload unused, services or unused network connectivity or off hour, so scale, resize. So it's all about interfacing things in a sort of human intuitive nature rather than, okay, I got to go get this Terraform module. Okay, I need to go program that. It's kind of going to go do that for you and then come back and say, hey, this looks like, something we suggest you doing at this time. And then you just say, cool, go. And then it goes and does it. And it sort of breaks down the barrier of having to be like a Terraform ninja, blah, blah, blah.
Or even looking at like, HP or the high speed encryption stuff, like should I enable that on these connections?
Right.
If
Yeah.
it's already enabled, am I even like, is this
Am I
worth?
using it? Is it
Yeah.
worth it? Should I downsize? Should I right size? All that. Yeah, definitely. That's kind of exactly, Blaine, where we're headed, and where I think, it makes the most sense.
Cool.
All
Thanks.
right. Yeah, guys, we are getting towards the end of this session. So you guys, anything more to present or discuss here?
Yeah, so we've
Mark?
got one last thing I wanted to present to everyone while we're here. The last thing we wanted to go into is I wanted to make sure that everybody had at least some sort of a semblance of practical application of what generative AI could do for the network engineer per se. So I'm gonna run through this here real quick. So what I did was yesterday I actually wrote a program that interfaces with the new AI model that Zuckerberg put out a couple of days ago. He's got an AI model that he refers to as Llama, and this is something that you can actually download and have running on your laptop, and you can interact with it much in the way that you interact with ChatGPT or Bard or Gemini. And then the great thing about what you can do with this with Llama and having it run locally is then you have a lot more control and flexibility with the ways that you can augment or train or otherwise just polish up the way that it'll work. And one of the things that you can do is called creating a RAG. And RAG is an acronym for what's called Retrieval Augmented Generation, and this allows you to basically deploy a data set to an LLM and say, all right, Mr. LLM, go look at all this data. And then I am going to talk to you about it, and and have you interact with it directly, just as if it were a part of like the pre-trained content that you would have in any old question, like, give me a recipe for the greatest noodle goulash, which is probably like one of the more common queries that ChatGPT will get. So this is a program I wrote yesterday, and it's just a wrapper that wraps around Llama, and what I did was I made it available to it a log file which was a security device. I think it was an ASA, and it was in the middle of getting attacked. And it was specific to a very certain kind of threat vector. And so what I did was I took this log right here that you can see on the screen, malware logs 2.txt, and making it available to Llama 3. So, and this is the same as basically taking this log file and dumping it into your ChatGPT interface, but it's much cleaner, it's much more efficient, and you don't have to keep on dumping the same log file and every time you send a request, and it makes it right available to you. So let me go through and I can actually activate the program. Okay, so I've got my model initialized now, and I can start sending prompts, and the file is loaded successfully. And when you're talking to the LLM in this context, you can say, so just tell me about the file. What is this? What's going on? So what I'll say is, tell me about the type of attacks that are present in this log file, and where are they coming from? Now, this is probably going to churn and choke on this for about 10 or 15 seconds. It's not quite as performant as what you would get from your web interface LLM, but it's actually really, really effective at just what you would expect to come from something that has LLM level capability from something running on your desktop. So here's my question right here. Tell me about the type of attacks that are present, and it'll say, okay, based on the log file, it looks like this is a collection of network connection attempts. The benign classification suggests these connections are normal and legitimate. However, there are a significant number of malicious classifications, and then you can see, the continuous iteration where it discusses all these different forms of network attack, alliterations, SYN flood attack. It starts giving you source IP addresses and how the attacks work. So this is about really up-leveling your ability to interact with data through the LLM, and you're just to be able to ask you questions, say like, what's going on here? I mean, how many times have you stared at a log file? I mean, especially when you were starting your networking career and you're like, what is this? You know, the first time you opened up Wireshark, I mean, that was probably like a daunting day when you were just like, Jesus, look at this nonsense. There's just colors and scripts and connection attempts and SSL chains and all this stuff, and it was a lot to take in. Now you're going to say, dude, what's going on here? And it's going to give you a really well orchestrated and like a well thought out analysis of what it knows these kinds of things to be, because it's been trained on it, you know, in the internet with Facebook's own log files. Maybe there's really no way to really get, you know, really into the weeds of what something has been particularly trained on with this kind of a thing. Even though it's open source, there might be a little bit of detail online somewhere, but really the way that you're going to be able to get, you know, experience with this is just, you know, to try these things, you know, and see what works and see what doesn't work. And this was pretty simple. Like, this is something I wrote in like a half an hour of just some Python. I made a text file of a log available to it, and now I can just start querying it right on the laptop. So this is just like the very first iteration of like what you can actually use generative AI for. Doing something like this will help you kind of get the ball rolling and kind of get that mental model and picture of what it means to apply generative AI to a networking context. This is something that everybody can do. I can make the script available to everybody. Like, I can put it up on GitHub, so you can download it, or you can just request it for me directly over the community. I can send it to you. But this will really kind of help you get you thinking of, like, you know, what are the things I can do here? What questions can I ask? And really, when it comes down to how am I going to use generative AI to do X for my level of productivity, it really is going to come down to, once I have an LLM set up with the data I needed to have, what questions am I going to ask it? What prompts am I going to send to it? And then once it actually has a masterful sense of that data, what can then I do? What kind of questions and what kind of ways can I interrogate that data in different dimensions after the fact, once I've had a good run at it?
No, that's awesome, man. Thanks a lot, Mark and Luke. It was a very valuable session for me, at least.
Thank you.
I hope everyone else actually enjoyed this session and then learned something. Well, together, we are in it, right? We are in it together, as people say it. We are all learning this networking technology with the AI now added to it. We have a community.aviatrix.com forum available. So if you want to continue the discussion, ask questions there, you can tag Mark and Luke over there, and then we'll get back to you. So thanks a lot, everyone. Katie, over to you for some final comments.
Yeah, so thanks everybody for joining. I did drop a survey link in the chat. It would mean a lot to us if you would provide us with your feedback. And there's also an opportunity to ask or request future topics. So please fill that out. It only will take you about a minute or so to complete. And hopefully we'll see you on the next one. That is August 23rd, and we'll talk about observability and resilience. So thanks everybody, and I hope you all have a wonderful weekend.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good one.
Thanks, everybody. Take care.
Good to see you guys again.
You too, Blaine.
One thing, is it possible that Mark can share this program link or the Git repository link?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.